Honda has lent us their rather lovely new Transalp 750 for a couple of days, so I haven't ridden this motorcycle as much as I'd have liked to, but I've ridden it enough to understand what it's about. And I think we should start today off by saying this is not really a baby Africa twin. We'll get back to why it's not that, but let's start off with what makes this such a nice motorcycle. And that is its comfort, its ease of use, and its engine. Comfort. This has a really neutral riding position. Typical adventure bike, but nothing is at an extreme here. You don't have a reach forward to the bars are not too wide. The foot pegs don't have any bit of rear set to them. They're surprisingly forward set actually. It reminds me sort of like an X-Pulse's riding position. This is a really comfortable, all-day sustainable riding position. And not just in the way you're seated, the seats are also very good, both for the rider and the pillion. There's a solid grab rail to hold. This windscreen is an accessory. We'll get back to what's accessory on the motorcycle, but it's really tall. Very little bit of helmet buffeting, but at high speeds, keeps you away from the wind. In fact, it keeps you so far away from the wind that I found myself sticking out now and then to get a little cool air. We're going through a heat wave right now. It's about 42 degrees peak temperature in and around Navi Mumbai, which is just crazy. So it's hot right now, which is why you see us shooting early in the morning. But nevertheless, back to the subject, this is a really comfortable motorcycle. The second very nice part about it is its new engine. Now, this is a motor that debuted in the Honda 750, which we haven't got in India yet. It's a new 750 odd cc parallel twin. Like every other new parallel twin, this has a 270-degree firing order, and like every other parallel twin, it sounds pretty good. Nice deep sound. It's an involving sound. You will like listening to that motor, but there's a lot more to it than just that. Starting off with its behavior in the city, I picked it up from the Andheri showroom. Really horrible place to ride a big bike, but the Transalp was really quite comfortable. Quite a few reasons for that. The clutch is quite light for a big bike. The steering itself requires very little effort when you're in traffic, and the whole bike has a really nice sense of balance. It doesn't feel top heavy. The seat isn't too high. They say it's about an 850 mm seat height. It is tall for some shorter riders, but it's not a high seat in the world of adventure bikes. In general, this is a really easy thing to manage in traffic. The one thing I did notice is that there's quite a bit of engine heat. Again, we're going through some really extreme weather right now, so that definitely is playing a role. Now, I do feel some heat in city, which is to be expected, but I thought that when you hit the highway, things would cool off, but not really. At higher speeds, especially once you cross 100 kilometers per hour, you start to feel warm air come out quite a bit on your shins. Now, I'm wearing proper enduro boots today, so I'm not really feeling it today, but when I was in my road boots, I could feel that out here. Nevertheless, you do feel heat coming in and around here under your thighs, and this is a sustained heat at highway speeds. It's not unbearable, but it is very noticeable, and it is something that you need to be aware of. Either way, the performance of this motor out on the highway is just fantastic. That's really what stands out to me on this motorcycle. Now, if you look at the spec sheet, it's quite a high revving engine. It's the most peaky motor in its class. Peak power is at 9,500 RPM. Peak torque is about 7.5. Those are slightly off-putting numbers for an adventure bike, but in reality, there's a lot of torque and a lot of rideability. I honestly never felt the need to rev it above 6,000 RPM. Above 8,000, you do feel a bit of strain in the motor. It tells you that you don't really want to be here. There is some performance there, but you're happier off keeping it lower down and riding the wave of torque. Now, for just how effortless this engine is, 100 kph is a breeze. 140 comes up at about 5,000 RPM. It's really effortless, easy long-distance cruising capability. And with so much wind protection from that windscreen, you could be sitting at pretty high triple-digit speeds in a complete zone of peace and tranquility. So as a highway touring machine, this is a fantastic bike. 90 odd horsepower, more than enough for India. Really quick, really effortless, and is proved to be quite usable in real-world city usage as well. But then you look at the spec sheet and you'll notice things like a 21-inch front wheel and an 18-inch rear, as well as decent suspension travel and pretty good ground clearance. And you'd be led into thinking that this is an adventure bike built with some serious off-roading in mind. That's not really the case, and to Honda's credit, they don't portray this bike like that at all. You will not see any sort of riding gods like Paul Tares doing insane things with this motorcycle. That's just not in their media marketing material. Instead, they say this is an all-road adventure tourer built for some light off-roading, gravel roads, things like that. And that's effectively the case. Now, for me, the reason I felt that it's not so comfortable off-road is that A, I think the foot pegs are a little too forward set. Really not a problem. The bigger issue, however, is in the suspension. Now, it's preload adjustable at both ends, but the rear is a little soft and bouncy. No matter what you do, you could raise the preload, but that's not really going to fix the problem. So when you're riding off-road, the front takes bumps reasonably well, but the rear tends to pogo on bigger bumps, and that just sort of kicks the bike up and it makes things a little uncomfortable, and that makes you want to reduce the pace. And that's the key thing here. It's not that the bike can't do off-road, it'll pretty much take you anywhere else most other adventure bikes will go, but at a gentler pace. So don't buy this bike if you want to live out your rally rider dreams of riding hard, hammering it, jumping it. Not really what it's about. But if you want a bike that you want to tour on, you want to take in any bad roads, you want to take it off-road, explore the unknown, ride at a gentle pace, it's a lovely bike. And speaking of bad roads, suspension comfort is also really very good. The rear shock is not very problematic on the road. It's only if you hit a big pothole or a series of bumps in the road, that's when you feel that softness come in. But in most situations, the ride quality is excellent. I should add that I weigh about 80 kilos in full gear, and those of you who are heavier or regularly ride with a pillion will find the rear shock to be a little more problematic. Now, from just the general look of things, this is a rather simple looking motorcycle. I do really like this side section, large panel out here. I love how it flows into the tail. Very neat looking design. The rear section is a bit boring, and that front headlamp is a bit too small for the design, and it doesn't really perform very well. If you're into touring, you want to do night riding, you definitely want to get some auxiliary lights on this bike. There's also the fact that the matte black color we have here looks a bit drab. The bike doesn't really stand out, but there's a much nicer looking white color. As for quality, it's a Honda. It's really well put together. There's some nice details all over, but it's a simple looking machine. The finishes and all are very nice. It doesn't really feel very fancy. However, the new TFT display also looks very nice, and even though it's not particularly large, it has a great layout with 4 different viewing options that all look good. There are also 4 fixed riding modes as well as 1 user customizable mode in which you can change things like the throttle sensitivity, the engine brake control, traction control and ABS. I do think that the ABS and the traction control on this bike is a little too restrictive, and you could just go over a speed breaker a little quickly. The system engages and it keeps it on for a long time, maybe 100 meters before it's willing to give you power again. That's even with traction control in the lowest of its settings in sport mode. You can turn the traction control and the rear ABS off through the user mode. Honda makes it a bit tricky to do the ABS deactivation. I had to Google how to do that. But the annoying thing here is that every time you turn the key off, it forgets what you did to user mode and it reverts back to the default setting. So if you're riding off-road, try not to turn the key off because you're going to have to go back into the modes and turn everything off, which is a bit annoying. While this bike's off-roading capabilities are a bit reserved, it's actually a really lovely thing when it comes to handling on a smooth road. These Dunlop mixed-toe tires are really quite nice. It's only a 150 section at the rear, but they perform really well. Steering isn't super sharp because of that large 21-inch front wheel, but the bike leans over with very little effort, and when it's leaned over, it's a really confident feeling. This is really good fun to ride on a winding road. The brakes are also up to the job. On paper, they're really quite basic, simple axial calipers, simple master cylinder. In reality, they're good enough. Not fantastic, but good enough. This display not only looks good, it's also Bluetooth compatible, so you can download Honda's app and get connectivity for your phone. That's a nice thing. Another nice feature is that it has self-cancelling indicators, but like most Hondas, the switchgear is really confusing. Where you would expect to find the horn, you have the hazard light switch. And if this is your only motorcycle, you'll learn this, but if you have different motorcycles, you will forever be hitting the wrong button. And that does get a little irritating. Features-wise, it's missing some important things that a premium adventure machine should have. For example, there is no cruise control or a remote preload adjuster for the rear shock or even a quick shifter. The biggest issue though is that this bike comes on spoked rims with tube tires. Now, I don't like to throw this term around lightly, but to me, at this price, that's a deal breaker. You can fix the issue with some aftermarket tapes that seal the rims, but that's not really a long-term reliable solution. The better thing to do is to buy the rims of the Africa Twin. They do fit here. You'll also have to change the rotors because the mounting points are different, and that will cost you an additional 1.5 lakh rupees. You can also add in the missing quick shifter as an accessory, but that will cost you about 25,000 rupees. On that topic, the bike you see here is full of very expensive accessories, including a tall windscreen, the handguards, the upper crash bars, the lower crash bars, the engine bash guard, and even the main stand. Add all that up and the accessories here alone cost upwards of 1.7 lakh rupees. Of course, you don't need to buy all of that, but we would strongly recommend adding a proper bash guard because the sump on this engine really sticks out and it needs to be protected. So how do we sum up the Transalp? Well, there are some traditional strong points. First of all, it comes with Honda's bulletproof reputation for reliability. Then there's the fact that the running costs in India are really quite low compared to other big bikes. The first service, I think, is about 7,000, 8,000 rupees. The second service, third service is at a 1-year interval. It will cost a bit more because you also have to change the air filter, but compared to other big bikes, running costs will not be an issue here either. In general, it's a very sweet-natured motorcycle, especially for those who like to tow and who aren't interested in hardcore, aggressive off-road riding. There is one issue though, and there's one thing that we in India do not get. This bike comes into India as a CBU, which immediately puts it at a disadvantage. It does not have that value for money appeal that it has overseas. Base price 10.99 lakh rupees, which is expensive, but the Transalp is lucky because it has no direct rivals. Things like the Tiger and all are a lot more expensive than this. However, start adding these accessories in. Add in the wheels. That brings the price up to about 12 to 13 lakh rupees ex-showroom, which brings it uncomfortably close to the Tiger 900 range. And no, this is not an equivalent motorcycle to the Tiger 900. That bike has better equipment, far more sophisticated suspension, more capability off-road, more performance on the road, and a general, more premium feeling. Yes, the Transalp will appeal to a lot of people who love the Honda badge, and rightly so, there's a lot of benefits there. But in India, this motorcycle loses its greatest appeal, which is its value. If you're okay with that, like most other Hondas, this is a very sensible and very appealing motorcycle. And it'll also be a really likable thing for a large group of riders out there.
This is what happens when we come on shoots in summer and somebody forgets to bring a water bottle.